history together. When I heard that Batgirl got a costume redesign and I saw it, I knew I had to make something Batgirl related. I was planning this week to make a Batman utility belt, and I still might do that someday, but after seeing the Batgirl redesign, I decided I really needed to make Batgirl's utility belt. This is actually going to be my first two-parter because this is kind of intense. So this week we're going to be learning how to make the belt, sort of just the base. Next week we're going to be making the cargo pockets, and I'm going to be showing you how to attach the cargo pockets onto your belt so you have a fully functional Batgirl utility belt. For this week and next week's, here's what we need.
A sewing machine, a good amount of pins, fabric scissors, yellow cotton thread, the yoke pattern, the belt pattern, and the belt end pattern, which will include the belt loops, which we're dealing with next week. All of these patterns will be available on the blog, links below. An iron, about a yard of yellow duck cloth, a 2-inch steel O-ring, and a 1.75-inch steel O-ring. First things first, iron your fabric. Even if you got it from the fabric store and it seems all nice, iron. This project is all about precision, so the first thing you want to have is nice, flat, unwrinkled fabric. All of it. Time to cut your pattern out. For the leg and the waist straps, I put the pattern down, put some weights on top, and then trace around it with a ballpoint pen. Then follow it up with some pins to make sure that the fabric doesn't slide around. I do this because the strap needs to be 1.5 times the circumference of whatever part you're doing. And that's longer than you can actually print. So I tend to trace around it, pin it down, and then scoot the pattern piece over to get it as long as it needs to be. Once you cut out 2 of each kind of strap, both the leg and the waist, you're going to want to pin the duplicates together and then take it over to your sewing machine and sew down the sides with a 1/2-inch seam allowance. For the point, put the needle into the fabric, lift up the presser foot, turn the fabric to your new orientation, and then put the presser foot back down to keep sewing. This will leave you with a very nice clean edge and help you keep a 1/2-inch seam allowance. The other thing to note is do not sew the bottom shut. Once you've sewn your straps, you're going to want to cut some relief cuts around the point that look just like this. Alright, now it's time to turn the strap right side out. I do this by opening up the bottom and then sticking my finger inside and pulling some fabric out and then pulling that all the way down. This is a really time-consuming process, so be patient. Once everything's turned right side out and feel perfectly free to take a pencil to make sure those points are poked all the way out, you're going to want to iron the crap out of those straps. Get them flat. Once your straps are ironed, take them back to your sewing machine and sew down again, this time with a 1/4-inch seam allowance for some top stitching. Now it's time to make the yoke. You're going to want to have 2 pieces of that yoke pattern and then pin them together and then sew down each of the 4 sides with a 1/2-inch seam allowance. Now leave each of the channels open, so you're going to be sewing down the 2 curves and the 2 flat parts. But leave everything else open and be careful around those curves to keep the 1/2-inch seam allowance. Once it's sewn together, you're going to want to cut some relief cuts so that it looks like this. Alright, time to flip it right side out. What you did for the strap, do the same thing to the yoke, being careful to make sure you get it all the way right side out. Now, just like for every other step, iron the crap out of the yoke. Time to attach the O-rings. Take a 1/2-inch of fabric and fold it inside each of the channels to give you a nice clean outside. Then, go ahead and take your O-ring, lay it on top of the channel, and lay the channel over it so that it's very secure. The big O-ring goes with the big channel, the little O-ring goes with the little channel. The important thing to remember here is which side the O-ring should go on. When the yoke is on your body, the O-ring should go on the left side of the yoke with the ends tucked away in the back. Now, using a zipper foot, sew the channel down so that the O-ring absolutely cannot move. You're going to want to try and get it pretty close to the O-ring, but be careful, they're made of steel and they will win in a fight between it and your machine. Alright, time to put everything together. Take your yoke and pin it onto a pair of pants where you want that pocket to fall. If you are actually doing a Batgirl cosplay, pin it onto the pair of pants you're going to be wearing. Then take your waist strap, thread it through the O-ring, and decide how long you want that overlap to be. Once you've found a length you like, pin it on, and then carefully match it over to the channel on the other side. Pinning there, doing your best to line up that channel and the strap as best you can. Repeat for the leg strap. Take the belt off, and then mark on the straps where they fall on the yoke and cut off the excess. Now, take the yoke's channels, fold a 1/2 inch seam allowance inside, open it up, and tuck the straps into the yoke up until the point that you marked earlier. This is going to be a slightly fidgety bit. Just keep tucking it in and then pulling it as flat as you can on the inside. It might take some extra fidgeting and it's definitely going to want to pleat, but if you keep messing with it and kind of laying it flat with your thumbs and tucking it in more and more, it will eventually lay pretty flat. I also recommend sewing 2 lines of stitching down on each yoke channel just to make sure that they're really strong and they're not going anywhere. Throw some pins on the strap for the overlap, and you are done with the first half of this project. See you next week for all the pockets and the snaps.